I've come to New York City, where the UN headquarters stands as a symbol of progress. Founded in the aftermath of war, it promises a better future. But I've come to check out a prominent statue given to the UN by the USSR because I think it symbolizes the two kinds of progress that compete for our allegiance. There's the biblical kind, but there's also a secular vision of progress. Here we have a gift from the USSR at the height of the Cold War. A man holds a mallet and a curved sword. Or you could call it, I think I know trolling when I see it. Progress is one of 6 cultural values discussed by the Keller Center Fellows, exploring 6 stories that shape how we live. Go to makingsenseofus.com.
It is such a symbol of progress, built in the modernist style appropriately enough. Here stands the United Nations headquarters. Here is a building that symbolizes how United Nations are going to come together after a world at war. The UN was founded in order to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. And when they broke ground on this site in 1948, they published the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Here is the Charter for Progress.
We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime hath brought untold sorrow to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women, and of nations large and small, and to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom.
This perfectly captures how we feel. The past is dark, the future, we hope, can be better. That idea is baked into modern Western society. Probably today you have heard somebody say something like this: get with the times, that was the dark ages, or they need to update their thinking, or those people are on the wrong side of history. The progress story is so powerful that nowadays people try to win moral arguments by simply stating the date. They'll say, how can anyone believe that in insert current year here? Even the most secular people believe in progress, religiously. And I say religiously, not just because of the force of this belief, but because of the source of this belief. Progress is a biblical idea. So check out this statue, unveiled in 1959. It's called Swords into Plowshares. And you got a man beating a tool of violence into a tool of agriculture, from death to life. It's the perfect encapsulation of everything the UN is about. And of course, it's profoundly biblical. It's taken straight out of Isaiah chapter 2. And in verse 3, it says, "Many peoples will come and say, 'Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways, so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore." This is part of the biblical vision for progress, and it begins on page 1 of the Bible. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. God sets everything in a direction and then methodically improves things. He even gets humanity to methodically improve things. And so we go from darkness to light. We go from simple to complex, from water to land to seed to tree, from animal to man to woman, from nothing to good to very good. It is all progressing. Read on in the Bible and you see Israel's story. First they are slaves and then they are headed to the promised land. You might find them in exile, but they're waiting for the Messiah. And when the Messiah comes, first he will suffer and then be glorified. It's cross and then it's resurrection. You know, some cultures, they think of time as a great circle. Round and round it goes. No progress. Other cultures have seen a decline narrative. We started with a golden age, but it's all been downhill since then. But the Bible has an arrow. We are going onwards and upwards. One day, God will wipe away all tears, and they will beat their swords into plowshares. Progress is profoundly biblical. The drafters of the Universal Declaration admitted as much in their more candid moments. Like John Humphrey, the Canadian law professor who first drafted the Declaration, he wrote in his diary that what the Declaration achieved was something like the Christian morality without the tommy rot. Tommy rot, brilliant word, It's like poppycock or balderdash. John Humphrey's basically saying Christian theology is tommyrot, it's nonsense. But after Christendom, the whole Western project has been to ditch Christian theology as tommyrot and somehow keep Christian morality. That is why the Declaration can speak of humanity with such dignity and history with such hope. These are Christian ideas, but with their biblical roots hidden. What happens, though, when you do more than hide the biblical roots of progress? What happens when you cut yourself off from them completely? Well, let's take a second look at where this statue came from. It was sculpted by Evgeny Vucetich as a gift of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR, to the United Nations in 1959. Communism is one example of many, of severing the progress narrative from its biblical roots. And maybe the look of the statue is starting to make sense to you. Here is a proletarian worker holding a mallet and a plowshare. Or in other words, a hammer and a sickle. Now, I'm no expert in Cold War politics, but I think I know trolling when I see it. I'll bet President Khrushchev couldn't have believed he pulled this off, a giant statue of a hammer and sickle right here in New York City during the height of the Cold War. Communism is one example, one of many, of progress that's been detached from its biblical roots. Karl Marx was a great prophet of progress in the 19th century, but there were all sorts of other prophets of progress. Marx was talking about political progress, there was Hegel talking about historical progress, there was Darwin talking about biological progress, there was Freud talking about psychological progress. And as those secular prophets of progress were prophesying, there seemed to be evidence backing up their claims. The Industrial Revolution was taking hold in the West, and there were unprecedented upticks in wealth, in health, in life expectancy. Progress seemed to be happening just as the secular prophets had said. But if the 19th century was a century of progress, what were we progressing towards? The 20th century has been called the murder century. More people died violently in those 100 years than in every century up until that point. We all believe in progress. The big question is, what kind of progress? Hitler wanted his 1,000-year Reich, and the death toll stretched to 75 million from World War II. In the USSR, the communists killed tens of millions in their revolution and their reign. Chairman Mao, when the statue was being unveiled, was launching his Great Leap Forward, in which probably tens of millions died. They were either beaten, worked to death, or starved to death in the name of progress. We all believe in progress. The big question is, what kind of progress? How do we discern the biblical idea of progress from all the counterfeits? Here are 3 questions you can ask. First, what is the standard of progress? When we say things are better now, what do we mean? Because by the standards of economics or technology or healthcare, things have improved a lot. But have human beings improved? Is our moral fiber better? If I was to travel to the past, I might impress an ancient society with my iPhone. I'm not sure I would impress them with my moral character. What's the standard? In Isaiah 2, the standard is clear. It's the Lord's ways, His paths, His law, His word, His light. He is judge. Let's ask secondly, who is the bringer of progress? Remember on the statue, they shifted Isaiah's language of they to we. We are bringing about this brave new world. That's a big shift. But in Isaiah, really the focus is on He. He, the Lord, will teach us His ways. The word of the Lord will flow out from Zion. He will judge between the nations. According to Isaiah, the Lord, through His word, is the agent of progress. And that's actually how history has worked out. Think of the moral changes that have happened in the last 2,000 years. There's the birth of charities and hospitals and hospices and education for all. There's the outlawing of blood sports and infanticide and child sexual abuse. Or think of the whole concept of human dignity and worth and rights that the Universal Declaration is founded on. That's biblical. Think of the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade. These have been profoundly biblical movements. The Lord, through His word, does bring progress. But He brings it in a very different way. That's the third question to ask about progress. What is the way of progress? In 1958, while Evgeny Vucetich was working on that statue, and while Mao was enforcing his Great Leap Forward, Martin Luther King wrote in a little magazine called The Gospel Messenger. And for the first time, he used a line that is now remembered by millions. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. He got the line from a 19th century abolitionist, a preacher called Theodore Parker. They both got it from the Bible. Parker and the abolitionists in the 19th century brought the Word of God to bear, and moral progress was made. King and the Civil Rights Movement in the 20th century was saying the arc is not done. The rights, dignity, and freedom that birthed abolitionism needs to be applied again in King's own day. And so he proclaimed biblical truths, and the arc continued to bend. But here's a vital question. Which way does the arc bend? Here's what I naturally imagine. I naturally imagine a rainbow-shaped arc rising up from the earth and soaring into the distance. It's an up and down arc. But that is not the biblical arc. That's a Babel arc. Remember Babel? Up they built by their own efforts to make a name for themselves, and in the Lord's judgment, down it all came with a crash. Up and down. That's the way of the flesh. What is the biblical way? Down and up. In Isaiah 2, we see that non-violence is at the heart of the Lord's revolution, swords into plowshares. The world brings progress by force. Think of the scourge of war. So, what's it like to lay down your weapons and use only the word of the Lord? It's very costly. But King, like many others in the civil rights movement, embraced that way. He embraced the vulnerability of non-violent, word-based progress. It cost him his life. But that's the way, down and up. That's the way the Lord brings progress. Jesus Christ refused to pick up a sword. Though he could call on 12 legions of angels, instead, the weapons of violence were used on him and exhausted in him. He rose up to proclaim peace. That is the way of his revolution. And it leaves all the others in the dust.
When the statue was unveiled in 1959, Soviet propaganda seemed so cutting edge. But now it's the hammer and sickle that are on the wrong side of history. Progress is real. It is biblical. There is an arc, and it does bend, but it bends down and then up. It's death and then life. It's cross and then resurrection. And in the end, all nations will see it is the Word of God that brings progress, and it's the Word of God that will prevail.